Ian Puddick found himself controversially charged with harassment by City of London police. This relatively minor charge resulted in raids on his home, office and accountants.
When you think about the allegations against Ian, there was overkill in the police approach to this, in the raids in his home, the raids on his business. It didn't seem necessary.
Police interviews went unrecorded. Accusations were made against Ian without any justification.
If what he was saying was true, what he has done is left a huge quantity of Class A drugs to be sold. Is that the sort of thing that a policeman would really do?
And worst of all, there is evidence that City of London police were influenced by outside voices.
You know, we live in England, things are transparent, things are whiter than white. Well, they're not. This is a case of, you know, somebody standing up and not allowing themselves to be bullied by these thugs.
Britain has been rocked by scandal upon scandal from its police force. The organisation has been repeatedly found wanting when it comes to stamping out corrupt and criminal behaviour in its ranks. My name is Michael Doherty. I'm a civil liberties campaigner and founder of Justice Now. I seek to bring about fundamental change to the systems of police accountability in the UK. Ian Puddick found himself controversially charged with harassment by City of London police. This relatively minor charge resulted in raids on his home, office and accountants. Police interviews went unrecorded. Accusations were made against Ian without any justification. And worst of all, there is evidence that City of London police were influenced by outside voices.
There was overkill in the police approach to this, in the raids on his home, the raids on his business. It didn't seem necessary.
If what he was saying was true, what he has done is left a huge quantity of Class A drugs to be sold. Is that the sort of thing that a policeman would really do?
This is a case of, you know, somebody standing up and not allowing themselves to be bullied by these thugs.
This is Ian Puddick. He runs a plumbing company. But these days he also seeks to expose and publicise police corruption. This is a story of how the police turned his world upside down.
It started in 2009. I found out that my wife at the time was having an affair, and, you know, let's be frank, these things happen and they always will. I tried to resolve the matter pragmatically by ringing the guy concerned. He was a board member of the world's largest reinsurance company, and my wife worked for him as a PA. I rang the guy up and asked for my wife to be moved while we sorted out our personal relationship. He wasn't happy with the phone call. I then, the next day, rang up the chairman of the company.
The chairman of Guy Carpenter was much more cooperative and helpful. Unfortunately, these phone calls would come back to haunt Ian. The board member decided to take strong measures against Ian for bringing this affair to light. The police were about to get involved.
The guy made a huge fuss and said, look, you know, there was no affair. You know, I've made it all up. I'm some kind of nutter that's created this story out of jealousy or spite or whatever the motivation was, and reported me to the police. Reported me to Sussex Police for harassment for making those calls. So what happened was Sussex Police looked at the matter and confirmed in writing that it was a civil matter and not a criminal matter. They also stated that my behaviour in the circumstances was reasonable, and they declined to get involved.
So Sussex Police were reported in on a charge of harassment. So in this country, this means causing somebody alarm and distress. Yeah. So at that time when he went to Sussex Police, had you done anything that you believe could have caused alarm and distress to anybody?
No, absolutely not. And this is where it all gets very, very, very sinister. Sussex Police at this point had bailed out and said, look, it's a civil matter, we're not going to get involved. The individual concerned contacted their sister company, a company called Kroll. Kroll are the world's largest risk and security consultants. They work for MI6, so they're a global organisation. They're not some sort of like backstreet sort of organisation, they're a global consultancy.
With the board members' local force, Sussex Police, completely uninterested in this whole state of affairs, Kroll brought a new force into the picture, London's police. Although not the main force, the Met, But the tiny City of London police force, who operate only 3 stations in their 1 square mile of territory. Guy Carpenter and Kroll HQ lies within this square mile. Michael Woolkind, QC, would later represent Ian in court. He remembers the damning emails that were disclosed by the Crown Prosecution Service to help Ian's case.
I saw certain emails that showed far too much involvement of a private security firm, far too much obedience by the police, apparent obedience by the police, to the desires of this private security firm, with whom the other man involved in this case had firm connections. But once Kroll became involved, the stakes are raised. They begin to dictate the course of this investigation. It ends up as a Guy Kroll-sponsored prosecution. That can't be right. That's not the way things should work.
Kroll sent an email to this gentleman confirming that not to worry about Sussex Police. They had friends at City of London Police, and they had confirmed that my actions were criminal. And that they would devote, it's what it says in the email, significant resources against me, including the use of Counter-Terrorism Directorate.
Ron Cuffley would serve as an expert witness at Ian's trial. He specialises in computer forensics and has previously served in the police and the army.
Yes, Kroll is very well known in the security trade. They're a big American company. They're often referred to, or they like to be referred to, I should say, as Wall Street's CIA. And indeed, some of their operatives are previously CIA officers. They have a reputation for being extremely good, extremely expensive, and prepared to sail very close to the wind. I'm not saying they'll necessarily break the law, but they will certainly pull out all the stops for their clients. And this is a reputation which they have and which they're keen to engender.
They immediately set about building a case against Ian. Unannounced, 2 City of London police arrived here at the London headquarters of Guy Carpenter's to interview Ian's wife for about 1 hour. They accused his wife of conspiring with Ian to make up the affair. They accused her of perverting the course of justice and left her in tears. The interview was not recorded, and the officers made no notes. What was going on here?
So she contacted City of London Police and asked for the names of the officers, who had authorised the officers to come and interview her, on what grounds they had done that. And City of London Police confirm that they have no records of any officers ever interviewing her. No officers have attended Guy Carpenter's head office at Tower Bridge, and there are no records or any reasons why they would be involved in such a matter.
It would not be until some time later that Ian would manage to obtain emails showing who had ordered this interview to take place. Incredibly, someone was giving orders to the police.
And the email specifically says that Ian Fatt, the head of Guy Carpenter and Kroll Security, contacted City of London Police, and he arranged for City of London Police to come onto the building, onto the premises, and to interview her. There's no records for any of this. We have to rely upon an American corporation, Kroll, and their internal emails.
But why did this explode into police involvement? What did the board member have to lose that would see such dirty tactics used? Outside the London headquarters of Guy Carpenter and Kroll, Ian told me about how and why things had begun to escalate.
As we know, a board member of Guy Carpenter's, I'd informed some of their clients that he had been misusing his expenses under Sarbanes-Oxley, or SOX law, which was brought in after Enron collapsed, and it's there to stop large organisations, board directors, management from fiddling their expenses, fiddling figures. Obviously, that was very, very damaging and very, very embarrassing for the company, and more importantly, it could affect their share price. Clients obviously finding out that there'd been this fiddle going on was incredibly damaging.
Kroll began gathering intelligence on Ian, which may sound innocuous, but it was in fact shockingly invasive.
The intelligence that they gathered on me is frightening. They obtained a ex-parte High Court order.
An ex-parte is that you weren't present, you weren't notified of the court case.
Didn't know it happened. Didn't know it happened. What they did in very short terms was they dressed up my phone calls of informing the company that this chap had been misusing his expenses in breach of SOX law as a low-level terrorist threat on an aviation-related business. So the High Court, the High Court judge granted the application, and that way they were able to access my bank accounts.
That a private company could obtain information from the High Court in secret in this manner is concerning. The aggressive way in which Ian alleges that they used it to harass and damage him is all the more shocking.
That somebody unknown telephoned a number of his suppliers and said that he was going bankrupt and encouraged them to get the money in quickly, and telephoned a number of his clients to say that he was a known drug dealer and that his company was being used simply as a front for drug dealing.
So this is huge black operation against me, a smear operation, purely because I'd embarrassed some people at very high level at Guy Carpenter's.
And City of London Police launched something called Operation Bohan.
What the police did was they were tracking me. You've seen the pictures. They were tracking my car, my vehicles, using satellite technology. Again, all at the expense of the public.
Ironically, Ian started to receive menacing phone calls from a withheld number. An anonymous voice threatening him, then hanging up. That could definitely be classed as harassment. But that was the least of Ian's troubles, as the police were about to crash into his life in full force.
The weight of the raids, the timing of the raids, the frequency of the raids was all surprising. It was as if the police had some extra motivation, some extra push behind them on this occasion.
My house is raided at sort of 6:30, 7:15 in the morning by the Terrorism Directorate. I'm arrested and whisked away in moments. It was very, very, very scary, incredibly scary. There's a simultaneous raid by the Terrorism Directorate on my company offices. And then also there's a simultaneous raid a bit later in the morning by the Economic Crimes Directorate, and they raid my company accountants. And this is a huge intelligence gathering operation. They remove all our computers, laptops, satellite navigation systems, mobile phones, digital cameras, and they send everything away to the high-tech crimes laboratory for forensic analysis. I'm obviously arrested. I've never been arrested before. In the police car, when they whisked me from my home to the police station, I told them everything. So we got to the police station, they took me through to the interview room. They said, look, you told us in the car, just tell us again.
The immediate concern for Ian upon arriving home was the damage that these raids had done to his company. Their computers had been seized, and they were struggling to do business. The police had been used as a weapon to damage Ian professionally and financially.
My business is completely stuffed. The computers aren't expensive, but all the data on them is expensive. So we've got customers and clients ringing up saying, you did a quote, you've got this, I'd like to go ahead with this job or that job. And we had no information. I mean, we couldn't tell our clients, by the way, sorry, we've just been raided by the counter-terrorist squad, they've taken everything away.
When you think about the allegations against Ian, there was overkill in the police approach to this, in the raids on his home, the raids on his business. It didn't seem necessary.
1 month after the raids on his home and business, Ian was interviewed by the police for a second time. This is Snow Hill Police Station where the interview occurred. Ian was shouted and screamed at by officers here before they made 2 serious allegations against him. First, they claimed that he had attempted to pervert the course of justice.
The forensics team, this is what they told me, had found on my computer information about Hendon Magistrates Court. I explained that I'd just started the process of becoming a magistrate and they'd been making notes. And they, well, we want the effing names of all the magistrates and judges you're colluding with, give us their effing names. Obviously didn't have a clue what they were talking about, tried explaining that, and they just got more and more angry.
The police were clearly clutching at straws, trying to create imagined offences out of information they had acquired through the raids. But when that didn't work, they started making things up entirely. They claimed to have photos of Ian taking Class A drugs.
In the end, they did admit that they hadn't seen the pictures and the pictures didn't exist. And I sat through this nonsense. It's not recorded. I'm not read my rights. I'm not cautioned. The officers made no notes.
Ian complained to the IPCC, the body that is meant to investigate police misconduct. They interviewed the officers who interrogated Ian, but neither of the men could remember it ever taking place.
I go back to the IPCC. As a plumber, I'm telling these investigators, could you check the CCTV's cameras, please? Because they will show the times, the dates, and obviously me be going through to this interview room that the officers cannot remember. The CCTV had been wiped in a freak accident, so that couldn't go ahead. I then go back to the IPCC for a third time and say, can you check the door locks, please? Because when the police officers took me through the station to that room, they used swipe cards, and I found out that those swipe cards, the time, date, officers' details, that data is not stored in the police station. It's stored externally, so the police can't tamper with it.
Okay.
I phoned up the IPCC a week later saying what's going on, and they have to admit, yes, the door logs do show that they were entered and accessed at the times I said. So the IPCC now go back to the police officers, and they have to now give an account for taking me through to that room because I'm in their care. This time, the two officers recover from their amnesia and give a completely false story. But because you've got two sworn officers giving a united story against a civilian, obviously they've sworn oaths to tell the truth, they're believed, I'm not. The case, or my complaint, is closed down.
After all of these interviews and raids, the only thing the police could charge Ian with was making the phone calls to Guy Carpenter. The claim that Ian caused alarm and distress was all they had to go on. But going to court meant that the details of the board members' affair and expenses would be revealed. Guy Carpenter began an internal investigation before all of this could come out. Their reputation was at stake.
At the end of the investigation, on the day that this board member was due to find out the outcome of this disciplinary investigation into misuse of company expenses, he resigns. And the senior partner at Guy Carpenter, a lady called Terry Woods, she spoke to my partner and said he's resigned today because he was going to be found guilty.
The board member immediately drops his case against Ian, and the whole ordeal seems to be over. But Ian is still seething over what's been done to him. So armed with the information he's obtained preparing for trial, he starts a website to publicise the corruption behind his prosecution. 4 days after Ian's website went online, police once again raided his home and business. Ian was out, so could not be arrested. Believing he was innocent, Ian contacted the police and arranged to meet them.
So they arrested me by appointment a couple of days later. This time I did take a solicitor. And what they said was in the interview that my new website had harassed this board member out of a job. That they at that point charged me with Section 2 non-violent harassment again for the second time, and the board member made a statement to City of London Police effectively saying that he had to resign after 34 years of employment because my website had harassed him out of a job.
Unfortunately for the prosecution, he resigned just on 2 months before the alleged harassment took place.
Ian promoted his website through social media and blogging, trying to raise the profile of his case. He even went to Speaker's Corner in London, where people can go and speak publicly on any subject without having to clear it first with the authorities.
They would send undercover police officers from the Terrorism Directorate to Speaker's Corner to listen to me whilst they're undercover. I was then arrested for speaking at Speaker's Corner. So again, the resources to get me were still there.
Ian finally wound up in court, charged with harassment. But the trial would see some bizarre allegations and exchanges as the prosecution case fell apart. Ron Cuffley successfully refuted the prosecution's expert report on Ian's online activities. Then, out of desperation, the police suddenly alleged that Ian had posted thousands of tweets online about the Guy Carpenter board member.
She was cross-examined and asked, have you actually seen any evidence, for example, one tweet or Facebook entry about this board member at all? And she said no. She was then asked, have any members of the investigating team seen any evidence to support what you just said? Yes or no? She said no.
Having failed to get satisfaction from the IPCC, Ian told the court about the aggressive interview in Snow Hill Police Station.
The judge was clearly appalled at this, and she stopped the trial. She stopped the trial, adjourned it, and she said, I want those 2 officers here in an hour. And I thought, yes, this is great.
The first officer again said he could not remember the interview with Ian. But then Ellis took the stand, the officer who had shouted in Ian's face and accused him of taking drugs. Ellis gave a baffling display. He said that the interview was necessary because he had found large amounts of cocaine in Ian's house. This story would crumble under cross-examination.
Feeling the pressure, suddenly he blurted out, when we searched Puddick's house, we found large quantities of Class A drugs. Oh, says the QC, what was the nature of these Class A drugs? Oh, they were cocaine. Were they crack cocaine? Yes, they were crack cocaine. What did they look like? They were a white powder. Now, that probably doesn't mean anything to most of your viewers, but crack cocaine is not a white powder. Crack cocaine looks rather like melted candle wax.
So my barrister said, so when you found the first cache of crack cocaine in the kitchen, you obviously discussed that with the other officers. He said, no, I didn't. He said, but I had to have seen it because they were with you and it was there. So you had to have discussed it with them. He said, no, I didn't discuss it with them. He said, but you made a note in your notebook though. You made a notebook. He said, no, I didn't make any notes. He said, but you phoned up your boss and went, Gav, I found a large cache of crack cocaine. You made that call to your boss to let him know that you found the drugs. And he said, no, I didn't do that. He said, but did you confiscate anything from Mr Puddicks' property? And he said, yeah, we confiscated a mobile phone, a satellite navigation system, a digital camera and a laptop and a PC. And he said, and what did you do with that? He said, well, we sent it all to the high-tech crimes laboratory for forensic analysis. And he said, did anything come back to show any elements of criminality? And he said, no. So he said, so coming back to the crack cocaine, when you confiscated that, which laboratory did you send that to? He said, oh, I didn't confiscate it. He said, well, you've got it yourself, or it's still at the police station? The officer said no. So he said, so you left the crack cocaine and all the paraphernalia in Mr Puddicks' house? He said yes.
If what he was saying was true, what he has done is left a huge quantity of Class A drugs to be sold. Is that the sort of thing that a policeman would really do?
Ultimately, though, the trial went Ian's way. Despite the police efforts in examining every minute detail of his life, they still could not get a conviction, even on quite a minor charge.
Sometime during the trial I described that this case was much more about embarrassment than harassment. In other words, it may have been awkward for certain other people that misbehaved, but in exposing other people's misbehaviour, embarrassing though it is for them, doesn't mean that he deserves to be prosecuted.
You were found not guilty at your trial?
Yeah, I was cleared.
I mean, how did you feel at that time?
Well, I was absolutely relieved. We were just absolutely relieved, just that it was all over. I think I cried. I did cry. I was just so relieved that I just got some justice, and they'd thrown all these resources at me on anything, lying, just doing anything they could, because the minute they got a conviction, everything's justified.
Ian complained to the IPCC yet again about Ellis. There was surely no way for him to escape punishment this time. Either he had found drugs and done nothing about it, or he had lied in court. Whichever conclusion the IPCC came to, he had to face punishment.
Has there been any accountability for that officer?
No, none whatsoever, none whatsoever. The IPCC, when they looked at this, incidentally, a second officer came out of the blue and said, oh, I was on the search party. I remember seeing all the drugs, paraphernalia, etc. through Mr Puddicks' property. Oh, I didn't make a note, I didn't confiscate it, I didn't tell anyone else, but I actually happened to remember seeing it there. So you've got two sworn officers telling lies. Obviously, I'm a civilian, they're sworn officers of the Crown, so therefore they wouldn't lie. It must be me. So again, the IPCC, or the Independent Police Complaints Authority, closed down the investigation.
Accountability is at the heart of Ian's quest for justice. The police must take ownership for their actions and face consequences. But what hope does Ian have when even the highest offices in the land can be stonewalled?
When Parliament discussed the figure of over £1 million, they went back to City of London Police and said, look, how much did you spend on this counter-terrorist operation? And the police turned around and said the time and resources it would take to find out the cost would be too much, and therefore they can't disclose the figure. Again, it's the lack of accountability. When Parliament asks, not even they can get they can't even get the right answer.
Ian knows that many people simply turn a blind eye to corruption. Their trust in the police is so strong that it's easier to ignore the voices raised against the boys in blue. Ian would hear this firsthand at Speaker's Corner.
So, yeah, I know that you've sort of tried to help other people, and you've met a lot of other people who've been affected by police corruption.
I get emails every week from people saying, this has happened to me, that's happened to me, this is what they did, what can I do? I mean, today when we were filming at Speaker's Corner, a guy came up to me today and said, thank you for what you've done. I didn't believe you. He said, and then he told me an experience that he'd had since my trial, and he was shocked at what the police had done to him, and he asked me if I could help him now do something because he felt very strongly about what the police had done to him.
Has this case, Michael, damaged your faith in the British police?
This case hasn't touched my faith in the British police. It's confirmed the level of my faith in the British police. I'm just not telling you what the level is.
Although he has paid a high price both personally and financially, Ian has been fortunate that he has been able to fight off the charges against him. Despite now being innocent in the eyes of the law, the injustice that he went through has altered the course of his life. His campaign to highlight police misconduct and push for greater accountability continues.
You know, how has this experience changed you?
It's changed things in me in terms of my beliefs. And I feel very strongly about those beliefs. It's about, some people might feel very strongly aligned to a political party and will go out and rally and support and do whatever they do for their political party. Well, for me, campaigning and bringing police accountability and transparency to the fore, for me, that is what's really important to me. So I will continue to do that, and I won't let them off the hook.